I wanted to do another video on the Daneland Vikings because I feel like I left a lot of detail out. Because I did. So to give a quick synopsis, the Daneland Vikings actually started under King Sven. Sven kind of started out as just the regular bandit, running up and down the ice floes in the Nordark Sea. Nordark essentially being the One of the big things that was happening was that a lot of these boats were originally being used for hunting creatures up in the ice. So the longships that were, again, being used for their maneuverability, that can go between the ice floes and follow creatures, were really good for things like whaling and beast hunting, and for evading the creatures that you didn't really want to deal with. But as soon as these other groups started using the Nordark Sea in order to trade with other nations in the north, it kind of became obvious what they should be doing. And Sven was one of the first people to be raiding, although he didn't tell anyone that. And Daneland is actually just where he had his main base for a while. Tail end of the second year is when he finally kind of declared Daneland its own kingdom after it finally built a few cities. A lot of them just being port cities, of course. He also has some control over Groton, essentially the Greenland of Jurgen. Although, again, most of its cities are on the edge, and it really reached its population max near the tail end of Jurgen running. But besides that, so for Sven, the Vikings were really just a means to an end. There really isn't a lot of money you can make off of islands and continents that, can't really grow much food. Sure, there's a thriving fishing and beast hunting business, but that's not really enough for Sven. So while the Daneland Vikings weren't exactly saying that, Sven, was paying them and was their boss, they were essentially using his territory to hide. They made these kind of snow cages out on ice and glaciers in order to hide, and they would wait and scout out ships that were coming by, and then they would just jump in their ships and raid them. And then they'd disappear right back into their hidey holes out in the middle of nowhere, being untraceable. This also helped Sven to really scout out for any kind of military incursions, like during the Great War. And the problem was that he became a pain in the rear for everyone. The main empire, Normark, Sovgard, and Rasheza, the Russian territory here in Jurgen. And they'd be a big help against them, and also a detriment to the main empire. So much so that the empire created an entire fleet just for killing sea monsters and the Vikings. The only issue was that while everyone knew, essentially, that Sven was the guy running it, they couldn't prove it legally. And by the time a lot of these teams were together, the peace accords with the Holy See didn't exactly allow them to just attack. Hold on tight for me and I'll continue this.